All right, well, I hope everybody is able to join. So welcome to Cerini Associates Nonprofit Update 2021. Like last year, we're bringing this event to you virtually, giving you different choices of sessions to attend. It's kind of like being in two places at the same time. You are in virtual room B. This is all about cybersecurity. It's a really cool topic. If you were looking, though, for nonprofit accounting update with Matthew Burke, that's in room A, virtual room A. But if you're thinking of staying here, you just can't make up your mind, that's okay too, because you know what?
Stay here.
Stay here is right. These sessions are going to be recorded, so you know what? You can watch everything afterwards at your own leisure. I am Shari Diamond. I'm a partner at Cerini Associates, overseeing the internal audit department, where we provide our clients with reviews of internal controls and making recommendations to strengthen the internal control environment. This entails looking at the effectiveness and efficiencies of operations, compliance with laws, rules, regulations, and policies, and of course the processes for identifying and mitigating or reducing risks. So one of the top risks that are impacting most organizations today, and unfortunately it has been for some time, is cybersecurity attacks, and that's what we're here to talk about. Ransomware, breaches, denial of service attacks, oh my. The hackers are getting quite capable and crafty at breaking into very large organizations, like the recent attacks at SolarWinds, JBS Meatpacking Company, McDonald's. That one kind of fell under the radar. And of course, Colonial Pipeline. And don't forget about all the unemployment frauds that are out there where they're hitting all these state agencies. If you Google that, you'll be amazed to find what's going on, as well as, unfortunately, COVID-19 benefit frauds. These are big companies, big institutions that have a lot of resources to dedicate to IT controls and protection. So if they can't stop hackers, what can a small organization do, especially nonprofit organizations who need every dollar to help support the programs and services that they provide? Nonprofit organizations are therefore considered easy targets for that reason. The hackers know you're not going to have everything up to date. You're not going to have the latest technology, software, hardware implemented, and you become a target. You might be saying to yourself, well, gee, I'm small. What would a hacker want with me? I can't even afford to pay much else. I'm not even that big of a nonprofit organization. Well, they're after your data. And believe it or not, most nonprofits have a lot of data that could be sold on the black market. Think about credit card information, donor information. If you're providing health services to people, that is extremely marketable. So this presentation is titled Spikes of Doom, for a good reason. These are scary times, but have no fear. We have two superheroes here. Joining me today, we have a fabulous presentation. I know you're going to love it, from RoundTably Technology. They are IT solution providers, starring your superheroes, Destiny Bowers and Kim Snyder. I know you're going to find this presentation not only informative, but way fun. So stay in this room. They're going to break down the different aspects of what is needed to increase your IT internal controls, as well as decrease your risks of cyber attacks. And before I turn it over to them, just some quick housekeeping items. We are recording each of the presentations. So like I said, if you're torn between two time slots, you're going to have access to listen to the presentations at your own time. On the right side of your screen, you're going to see an option where you can click on the chat button or a Q&A button. If you have any questions, I'll be monitoring that. And we should have time at the end of the presentation as well. Also, you'll have an opportunity to meet with them after the presentations in the breakout sessions starting around 1 p.m. So, Destiny and Kim, are you ready to take it away?
Yes, we are.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spikes of Doom. I'm Destiny Bowers, vCISO for Cloud Services with RoundTably Technology.
And I'm Kim Snyder. I'm VP of Data Strategy at RoundTably Technology.
And RoundTably Technology is a strategic partner, so we work with nonprofit organizations all over to help you leverage your technology, fulfill your mission. And we do a lot of these great cybersecurity trainings with great partners, and we're really thrilled to be here today. So to kind of set us in the mood, and this is going to help you see why we're calling this Spikes of Doom, we're going to flash back to the 60s with our superheroes. So we all know that Batman sometimes would get himself in some predicaments, and we're going to give you a few pointers today about how to get out of these predicaments.
All right. You've had your laugh, Catwoman. Now what do you intend to do with this?
Do? Well, first I'm going to give you two a few pointers.
We're going to start out with a little poll just to get a sense of how you feel about your cybersecurity. Kim, take it away.
Okay, I am now launching the poll, which will be on the right side of your screen. And the poll basically asks this: how would you rate the cybersecurity posture of your organization? You have no idea. It's non-existent, inadequate, okay, I think, pretty good, totally appropriate, Fort Knox. So take a moment, and there are no right or wrong answers here. This is anonymous. Okay, we have the majority, interestingly, in the okay, I think category. We have two that are totally appropriate. And we have also about the same number inadequate. So the majority landing at okay, I think. So let's see how okay that is.
Oh, yeah. So let's hop into it. So one of the things that we like to talk about when we talk about cybersecurity in general is something called threat modeling. This also couples with risk assessment and, in the end, your incident response. And we're going to take a look at Bruce Wayne's threat model right now. And when you look at threat modeling, you really need to take right? If you need to protect something, you have to know what you have in order to be able to protect it. Then you also want to take a look at what existing protections you may have in place for these already. And then you want to take a look at what the threats are and ask yourself 5 questions. What is it that I want to protect? What is it that I need to protect it from? How likely is it that I am going to have to protect it? How much effort am I willing to put into protect it? And how bad will the outcome be if I fail to protect it? So in this particular threat model, we have assets like the Batcave, Alfred, emails, bat text, what have you. And in your nonprofits, you have your donor databases, you have your CRM, you have your bank accounts, you have your general data, and of course your emails and other information. Then we take a look at the protections. In Batman, we have his security system. He's got a hidden bat cave, and he uses encryption on all of his communications. And for you, you may have things like multi-factor authentication, or you have your in-office firewalls. Perhaps you're using other services or software that helps protect your data. And then you have the threats. In Batman's case, we have Catwoman, we have the journalist trying to find out his identity, and because he's working outside of the law, the police as well. And for the regular nonprofit, some of you may have mission-based adversaries, depending on the type of work you do, but most people fall into the category of the general threat, which tends to be financial. You have data that has value to it. You have accounts that have value. It could even be the licensing for your Adobe suite. All of that has value. And then we align these things and say, well, this is really important to us in our mission. And this protection that we have is not sufficient from the threat that we think is most likely to happen. And then this will help you bring all of that into alignment by increasing your securities or by changing your practices, looking at your policies, things along those lines. And that coupled together is your threat model. And then in the end, you will come up with an incident response that's going to tell you, should this thing occur, this is what we do to mitigate it. And so in the real world scenario, all of this can feel like the walls are closing in on you.
Holy ice picks! What are we gonna do, Batman?
Particular situation isn't that bad.
And hence the name of this presentation.
Spiked walls of doom. So let's put ourselves in this same scenario. So Kim, talk to us about Kelly.
Okay, so Kelly is a nonprofit professional. Okay, she is probably one of you out there, and she is in the midst of the walls of the spikes of doom. So let's see what these spikes of doom look like for Kelly. Okay, so on this side, and this is the side that Destiny gave me to give, okay, are the faceless bureaucrats. Okay, we'll call them the more boring, less exciting spikes of doom. So, and these are the kinds of, well, we're going to run down the spikes. So.
Yep. And mind you that these are the legal entities. So this isn't the criminal side of security right now.
Yes, these are non-criminal. That's what I meant by the more boring, the more staid. Okay, so and first up, we have HIPAA and PCI, which are examples of kind of regulatory legal standards of practice, right? HIPAA, many people know it as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That deals with patient health information. We also have the payment card industry data standards, and that guards, that's from the credit card company, and that guards financial information and outlines clear guidelines, not just for the data, but for security around the data. Okay, so this is, in order to be compliant, there are certain regulatory demands. And we have, for laws, for those of you in New York, which I would imagine are most of the people here, the New York Shield Act passed rather quietly in 2019, went into effect as COVID was taking shape. So that kind of went unnoticed until much more recently. And that, the New York Shield Act defines certain types of data that needs to be protected, but also has, which is unusual for these kinds of laws, has a real cybersecurity requirement. Okay, so it's a certain reasonable standards of practice around cybersecurity that are required for covered organizations. GDPR, of course, is the law that came into effect in 2018 in the EU, affecting EU data. It has set the standard for lots of other data privacy laws, and we should expect more down the line, not less of this. Okay, then we have our auditors. And actually, as I was getting ready for this, I see that Cerini Associates, so sorry to have you on the boring side, but Cerini performs tasks. So not really boring, they're your protectors. Think of it that way. We'll reframe that one. But anyway, but regardless, many organizations that have come to RoundTable in a little bit of a panic around the Shield Act have come because their financial auditors are doing their they're doing their audit, and they say, okay, so how in compliant with New York Shield are you, since you would be covered? So and partners. So if you do business or if you work with alongside other organizations who may fall within these categories, so even if you're maybe not on your own New York Shield covered, somebody that you're working with may be, which means that you as someone, as a business associate, need to also take the same kinds of standards, or you put them in jeopardy. And finally, okay, and insurers. All right, so insurers, they look at risk, right? And in today's world, vulnerabilities around cybersecurity are a real risk. And so that's going to affect premiums, and also even whether an organization qualifies for certain levels of insurance. So these are all the, we'll say, the legal types of spikes we have. And I will turn it over to Destiny for the criminal.
Now we get the criminal side. So we've got one legal side pressuring you in, but we also have the criminal side of things. So this is our faceless cyber criminal. And so the things that we are concerned about for most organizations are ransomware. This is where your data is stolen from you. It is encrypted. And unless you pay the ransom, your data will remain encrypted and you can't get it back. And unless you have things like good backups in place and have the ability to recover all of that data, you're in the position of either losing everything or paying that ransom. What we're seeing more of as well now is extortion. So it's kind of along the same lines where your data has been exfiltrated, but instead of saying, well, we're going to encrypt this and not give it back to you, they're extorting you and saying, we're going to release this data on the dark web, we're going to release this data to different entities, and if you don't pay us, then you're going to have to deal with the public relations piece of this and the data exposure piece of this. We also have the business email compromise. Now, this is something that you don't see so much in the news, but this is probably one of the biggest threats that the majority of organizations will have. And this is essentially where people get into your email and they sit there and they camp out and they watch email activity to learn more about the transactions of the organization, to learn more about the style of the organization, and can then target specific things like donations or other financial transactions, wire transfers, payroll communications, and then they will be able to do well-crafted emails from within the organizational email to then bypass the real accounts and send everything to the criminal accounts. And here's one example where almost, $750,000 was stolen from a nonprofit. So that's definitely something to look out for. We also have website compromises, which can work in a couple of veins. One is where your website will be infiltrated and all of your donations will be redirected to the accounts of the threat actors, or another threat, which is a doppelganger website. It is a similar domain name to what your organization might have. The page looks like your page. They might even advertise so it comes up in search engines. But again, all donations and everything will be redirected to the threat actor's organization. And then we also have our denial of service attacks. Now, these may be against your own site, where we will keep your site down unless you pay us money, or it can even impact people by having the vendors that you use be victim to this, where you are unable to get to the sites that might process your payments or hold your services or hold your data. So when you take a look at these in combination, we now have our walls closing in on us. And even Batman isn't able to push them apart. So what can push them apart? What can we do here? We're going to turn to, hopefully our next slide, to Lori.
And Lori, yes, Lori can get Batman and all of us out of this jam that we've been describing. So Lori is the nonprofit professional whose cybersecurity posture is closer to that of, say, Fort Knox than maybe we're kind of a little okay. So let's see what kinds of things Lori has been doing at her organization to make sure that they are secure. Okay, first up on the list is a risk assessment. Without a risk assessment, you don't know where you are and you don't know where your vulnerabilities are. So this is generally an annual process. And what they look at in a cybersecurity assessment is threat modeling. So what kind of threats may you be vulnerable to? Evaluating what safeguards you have in place now, and also where you are vulnerable, where there are gaps. And the output of that is generally a cybersecurity plan and a roadmap for cybersecurity. That is the foundational step. Without that, you don't know where you are. Next up is security awareness programs, otherwise known as cybersecurity training, which comes in a variety of different formats: phishing, awareness videos. This, in a sense, is a brief cybersecurity training. Your staff cannot be trained enough, and cybersecurity training is really one of the most effective ways to protect your organization and to protect your staff, who are actually the unwitting points of entry for hackers. So like that story that Destiny was saying about the hackers that stole almost $750,000. Okay, it's through staff. And if they're not aware, if they're not suspicious in a healthy way, then you are at risk. Next up, we have policies, okay? So policies and procedures set up standards for how your organization, how your staff use technology, as well as how they handle the data. And it's not enough just to have policies. So policies have to be socialized. People need to know them. So if you have an acceptable use policy, that has to be, people need to know where that is, or data handling policies, and they get updated. New York Shield made for many changes for organizations that already had policies in place. So it's a, all of this. Cybersecurity, I just want to go off script for a second and say cybersecurity is such an ever advancing, ever worsening, cyber criminals are so out there, and this stuff is just in quantum leaps in terms of criminal behavior, that it is always in motion. So anything like the training, risk assessments, policies, these are things that are ongoing works in progress by necessity. And next up, we have endpoint protection. So that's talking more than just your workstations, though it is your workstations, but endpoints can also be servers. They can be mobile devices, all right? So a lot of people are getting or interacting with work on home computers, especially in COVID, and also on their mobile phones. These are all endpoints. And endpoint protection is more than antivirus, okay? So the EDR and MDR, which are the last things listed there, are really speaking to more managed security processes. Next up, we have network protection. Okay, so when we think about network protections, we typically think firewalls, all right? But in ever kind of, as we all, as a society and culture and businesses, move more into the cloud as the place of conducting business, we have to implement other network measures like secure DNS, which protects you while you're going around the internet, okay? It protects threat actors from redirecting you to malicious sites without you knowing it or without your staff knowing it. The Secure Access Service Engine, or SASE it's called, helps to ensure that your connections are secure. And when you're accessing information over the internet, you're getting that in a secure way. And this is super important because we are conducting increasing amounts of business on the internet.
Yeah. And I just wanted to point out here that we're not looking at these side-by-side alignments anymore. This isn't that one side is still working on the legal entity, the regulation side, and the other side is the criminal side. All of the things we're talking about right now that Lori is doing are going to be holistic across the board, that are going to help with all of these entities. All of them will give you better levels of protection, but they might address different pieces of it. And we like to talk about things in a layered effect, right? Where not any one thing is going to provide more security. You do need to, provide total security. You do need to layer things up where, just like, think about protecting your castle back in the medieval days. You would have your moat. You would have your crocodiles in your moat because somehow crocodiles made their way up to England. And then we would have the drawbridge, and then we would have the portcullis, and then we would have the guards, and we would have the castle walls. And all of these are going to give you the protection. You wouldn't have just one thing. So in layering these, we're also going to look at some of the other items, one of them being your identity management. And this is something that I think we all think about because it is relating to our passwords, our password management, making sure that we have multi-factor authentication enabled for all of our accounts. We can also look at services that provide single sign-on, meaning that there is a single entrance into all of the cloud services and software as services products that we use, something along the lines of Okta or Duo. And we also want to make sure that we are implementing our password security controls. So a lot of different systems will allow you to set the complexity and minimum standards for your passwords. And a lot of times people leave those at the baseline. And unfortunately, the baseline isn't always secure enough. So you do want to look at your identity management and your access into all of your systems as another multi-layered approach. We also have monitoring and testing. And so Kim spoke a little bit about the things that we do in our security awareness program, one of those including dark web scans, but we need to expand beyond that. So we want to make sure that you are doing periodic scanning on your network and on your website. You want to do all of those dark web scans for any accounts that you might have in your organization. And if you use multiple domain names, you would want to cover those as well. Doing your tabletop exercises to walk through those different risk scenarios. And in some of the more mature organizations, looking at things like penetration testing or ethical hacking. And then, of course, the ongoing phish testing. And then you also want to have the alerts set up for these things, where just like a burglar alarm, if someone breaks in, you get that lovely ringing noise that lets you know, hey, somebody's trying to get into the house. You want to have that same sort of alerting set up for all of your systems as well, so you know when an incident will occur. Another very important piece is going to be your backups. So when you think about the risks that you have from ransomware, from extortion, and other types of data exfiltration or data compromise, and when we think about what's called our CIA triad of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, two of those protections are going to come down to the backup piece, that if our data is compromised in its integrity, things get changed or they get lost, we have the backup for it. And then we also have our availability, where if something is lost or otherwise compromised, we can restore it. And we also want to think not just about our file-based data, but our SaaS and cloud applications as well. Our email accounts that might be in G Suite or that might be in Office 365. Our Salesforce data. Salesforce no longer provides backup, so you now have to do that independently. But even services like Dropbox and Box, all of those you want to take a look at for backups. And then, of course, we do have our insurance. And it is recommended that you look at cyber liability insurance nowadays. There is a likelihood that somebody will end out having some sort of occurrence within their environment during their business lifetime. Hopefully it will just be the once, but on occasion you might have more. And so you want to make sure that you are covered for this. And you also want to make sure that you are leveraging any of the resources that your insurer might give you. They might have things like incident response plan templates, and check out what your current business insurance may already cover that you can double up on or you can expand upon. And we also have, as Kim alluded to, our incident response plans. And again, these are really important because you don't want to wait until your kitchen is on fire to know where the fire extinguisher is, to know what kind of extinguisher you need to put out different types of fire, to know where your fire exits are, and to figure out who's going to get the cat who's hiding under the bed out of the house before something happens, right? So when we take all of these different things and we put them all together, what we're going to be able to do, hopefully, is start pushing apart these walls of doom and give ourselves a little bit of breathing room.
The old cat and mouse game. Exactly.
But it was scary for a while, wasn't it, Batman? Yeah.
Your sense of humor leaves me cold.
Perhaps my next idea will warm you up, Batman. It's quite interesting. Almost cataclysmic.
So, you gotta love it. You gotta love the shows back then. So we're going to launch us into another poll.
Okay.
Kim, take it away.
Okay, and now that you've heard us talk about some of these different measures, these are different types of the protective spikes, right? The different types of cybersecurity measures. And we're asking, and I'm going to launch the poll now, I am confident that my organization has this in place. And you can select all of these that apply.
Okay.
So you are confident.
So we've got our risk assessments. We've got our security awareness programs, our clear technology and data use policies, of course, the endpoint protection, our network protections, our identity management, multi-factor password managers, monitoring and testing, backups, and our cyber liability insurance.
Okay, so the things that people are very confident that they have, okay, the higher degree of confidence is with backups. So that's the thing people went to first, probably. So sorry about the little poll glitch there. And the second thing was risk assessment. So that's coming in a distant third or a distant second from backups. Backups have the most confidence.
Okay, great. And and I mean, we probably would have had a little bit of a different result. Unfortunately, sorry about the poll glitch. If you want, feel free to drop into the chat some of the other things that you have. But when we look at all of this in combination, there are a variety of different things. Some of them really come down to from a we think about the cost on a lot of these, where a lot of it really is just organizational time. There are things that you can do that don't necessarily have a cost factor. Some of them, because they are software or third party, you might have a little bit of that, but it's something to think through as you're doing your budget, that in order to meet this compliance, and when it comes to things like security insurance, that you can actually get reduced rates at times by having some of these things in place. So when they're doing that audit on it, they're going to say, well, we're going to charge you more if you haven't done these things, but your rate is going to go down if you have. And then you also think about the return for the organization on how much time and expense you would have if you needed to remediate any of these particular instances. So what I would say that we like to use as a kicking off point for all of this would be your cybersecurity assessments, right? So this is where you're able to have an external entity like us come in and help you walk through all of these different things, to take a look at your landscape, to help identify where your risks might be, and to help raise the cybersecurity maturity of the organization by going through all of those things with you. But for today's event, we do have a little bit of a cataclysmic offer for you, that if you are interested in doing this for your organization, that for the first companies to sign up, we will give you a great discount on this. And then we also have another interesting piece to this offer that I'm going to let Kim talk a little bit more about.
Okay, so the first 2 signups for this will get a free 1-year access to RoundTable Square. And while I could spend quite a lot of time and run us out of time telling you about what that is, suffice it to say it is a very new initiative from RoundTably Technology. It is a hub for nonprofit professionals. Anyone with technology responsibilities, it's a hub for people to gather, share ideas, take classes, and access resources. And we are centered around a repeating 6-part class, Your Excellent Technology Adventure, which is taught by me, Joshua, and also Destiny. So that's another part of this cataclysmic cyber offer.
And the one thing that I like about this as well is that it can be contributed to the ongoing learning, and it's available for the whole organization. So it's not just focused on and available to just the IT professional in your organization, but anyone who deals with data or data management or other people in your operations who you think can gain value from this as well. So we are any kind of Q&A. I know that we've got our lounge later on, but if you have any questions about anything that we talked about or wanted some more information about any of those pieces, feel free to put it into the chat or put it into the Q&A. We're here to answer anything that you might have, but we will also be available later in the lounge area.
I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A right now, but I actually have a couple of questions, and I was actually in the chat, for that last poll, because I thought that was really interesting to find out what organizations do have in place right now. Were they confident that they have? There was a lot of different things listed in there. Backups are great. I can go down the list and say, well, after backups, do you know where the backups are stored? Have you even restored from your backups? That's like another really good and key question to ask. So I guess, that's a list of things that you'd have to have, a nonprofit organization would have to have in place. What is the top things that you might recommend that they go for? And a nonprofit that may not really have a lot of resources to dedicate, where do you think might be the first place that they should be channeling? Is it the backups?
Well, and I think it's a combination of things, really. I mean, the backups obviously are very important, and you bring up a really great thing about restore testing, that you don't know if things are being properly backed up unless you try and actually restore it. So as part of your ongoing backup, some backup services will give you screenshots and show you that it's working. But I would say trying to schedule with yourself or with your IT provider to do at least quarterly or yearly backup restore testing for your different pieces. And remember, since you're backing up different things, you want to do restores from all of those. Do the email, do the file, what have you. I would also say that you really want to take a good, strong look at your identity management. That's the next one. All of the accounts that we have nowadays, for the most part, are protected by a logon and password. And the first thing that you should do, and this does no cost associated with it at all, is to implement that multi-factor authentication on everything you can. It is going to exponentially secure your accounts, that it's at this point almost not even a question as to if we should do it, is a how soon can we get it done. And again, no cost to that, and you can do it through your push notifications, you can do it through authenticator apps, text messaging if you have to. And for organizations where you may have staff who are using older devices or maybe don't have smartphones that or don't feel comfortable using it, you can, for a small cost, purchase something along the lines of a YubiKey, which is a hardware device and probably the most secure way of doing multi-factor. That is just a hardware key that goes into your physical machine that you have to touch in order to get in. But I would say identity management, looking at password managers, there's a lot of nonprofit discounts out there for password management. Looking at those would definitely be the next on the list. From here, the things that are low cost, I would say, are also looking at your policies, right? So you really, in order to help people understand what they should or shouldn't be doing, have to give them some direction, where if someone doesn't know that it's not okay to connect to public Wi-Fi, they can easily be compromised by not knowing that a public Wi-Fi could actually be subject to something called a man-in-the-middle attack,
Right.
where it can redirect you because you've connected to a suspicious wireless, site, to put in your data or other things into these doppelganger sites, these spoofed sites, and then steal your data from there. But if you're not making your staff informed, then they don't know what they should do. Good, solid endpoint protection. Again, there are a lot of nonprofit discounts for things like, I think Bitdefender now is available on TechSoup. So these are at a greatly discounted cost for nonprofits. Or a lot of times, if you don't see what you want on TechSoup, you can go to the vendors directly, and they will have their own discounts that aren't always curated by TechSoup. If you are not familiar with what TechSoup is, go to TechSoup.org. It is really a clearinghouse for all sorts of nonprofit discounted software and hardware and other services. And if you didn't know about it before, check it out. You can end up saving yourself a lot of money on things. And then, of course...
when you're done, sorry. I just want to pop in with one thing, because one of the things that I think is super important that organizations do is cybersecurity training, okay? Because staff are often unwittingly the weakest points of entry, okay? And those email compromises, that's how that happens.
Big.
And developing a culture of cybersecurity. And what I mean by that is, and that's part of the training, is it becomes okay, it becomes socialized across the organization, that it's okay if I got an email that looks kind of weird, then I can say, Destiny, did you send me that today? Really? And I can ask that question. Or it's a gut response to kind of to get a second opinion on something. That is something that we've worked at RoundTable to do. I know that organizations struggle with that, because I might be thinking, I don't want to ask Destiny. Yeah, she probably did send me that email, and I don't want to be a pain. I don't want to bug her. Okay, that has got to go, because that is where the danger lies. Right?
And we will give you that one-word cybersecurity training that we give to every organization, and that one word is verify.
Verified. Yeah, trust but
Verify. If
Yeah.
you have any suspicion, if it's got an attachment, if it's got a link, if the name doesn't match the email address, if it's written in a way that the person doesn't normally write, if the email signature is weird, if it has anything like initiation, fear, authority, any of those social engineering kind of buzzwords that we have, or even that innocuous like, hey, when you have a minute, send me your cell phone number. I need to give you a call. Verify, reach out to that source. And to Kim's point about having a culture that makes people happy that you're reaching out as opposed to feeling annoyed by it, verify, go to the website that you've looked up on your own, find the number from a different source, call the person if they've emailed you. Don't necessarily trust that text that comes in. Don't buy gift cards for anybody. But yeah, but verify is going to, because 90% of these breaches are coming in through email phishing attacks or text phishing, voice phishing, and they can easily be thwarted by that simple one word, verify.
Who do you usually work with? Like, and who's your like go-to contact in a nonprofit? Like, what type of individual, are you able to work with and get them to effectuate changes? Because it's really difficult for some of the smaller nonprofits to dedicate the resources, as I mentioned earlier. How do you convince everybody? The board, the management.
Usually by coming in and doing the initial like cybersecurity training and scaring the heck out of everybody, because it really is kind of scary out there. But we work with everyone, right? We'll work with the accidental techie. We'll work with the, operations manager. If you have an IT person, the IT person. It really depends on the organization. Honestly, the best person to work with is the person who understands and really wants to help facilitate this change in the organization. Whoever is an advocate for it, whoever has the passion for it. And speaking to Kim's point again about culture, is there really does need to be a buy-in from leadership, right? There is sometimes a cost that's associated, but a lot of times it's more about the thought shift. It's more about the cultural shift that helps embrace it. As I mentioned, there are things that you can do that don't cost anything, but you do have to have your organization embrace that and have the understanding of why this is important. And a lot of times it helps to have a different voice in the room, where you might have someone on site who's been saying, I've been saying this for days, weeks, months, years, but occasionally you do need to bring another voice into the room to say, hey, we're corroborating what they say here.
Right.
We work in this, every day. We're muddying, we're sloshing around in those waters. And I will tell you, those waters are filled with sharks and crocodiles.
Absolutely. That's something that's good, because it partners a lot with the internal assessments that we do for a lot of our clients as well. Even if we're on the external audit side and we're looking at things, we always have to assess and evaluate the IT controls in order to understand how it's protecting the data that we're evaluating. So it's all really integrated and important. I think one of the things, the takeaways, we got about a minute and a half left, is really understanding your data, know what you have to protect. I think that's really key. What little piece of advice might you be able to give out to our folks about, like, how do you stay on top of all the threats, the latest threats that are out there?
There's a lot of really great podcasts, and there's a lot of really great newsletters that you can sign up for.
And our cyber tips.
And, well, blowing up my spot, you can sign up for RoundTably Technology Cyber Tips. So if you just go to roundtabletechnology.com.
I'll drop it in.
Yeah, and so Kim will drop that in for you.
Right,
we will actually do weekly tips, and then we also have our own monthly video series with Tater and the Stash, because we like to make cybersecurity a little bit of fun. Right. And so, those will be a little bit more in depth. But there are also, outside of hours, a lot of other things that you can sign up for to get those weekly or monthly tips that are out there that will also tell you about what's going on in the landscape, what the current threats are, because a lot of what really is going to pertain to you isn't what's going to show up on the news. Like Colonial Pipeline made a big splash, but that's not the typical threat that's going to happen to your organization, right? So it's the little things. And then also your own vendors will have alerts and updates for things. So if you're using Microsoft services or Google services or Salesforce or what have you, they will also generate their own things. So just kind of, taking that extra while you're having your coffee or doing what have you, to just skim through those to, and then flag something that might be salient to your organization is also really helpful.
Well, you have both been excellent. Destiny, Kim, thank you so much. Thank you to RoundTable Technology. We are just out of time. Actually, this is a topic I know we could all talk about endlessly. Please feel free to reach out. Yes, very good.
Thanks so much, Sherry. Thanks everyone for coming.
Take care. Be well.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.